Hello, Internet. I am back again. I hope everyone's had a great weekend. I know mine was great, very restful. So, I won't delay. Let's just get right into this. A writer double feature. Something new, but I think this will be great. And both adventure series in my mind. So, let's begin. Let's start with Box 13. This show follows Dan Holliday, a former journalist and writer. After having a massive bout of writer's block, he decides to put a reoccurring ad in the newspaper reading, and this is a direct quote: Adventure wanted. Will go anywhere, do anything. Right, Box 13, care of the Star Times. And using this ad, he would attract inquiries from a wide range of people needing his help to solve their problems, or on occasion, a convenient patsy. Dan would go on these adventures and afterwards write a story based on his experience. He's helped in this process by his secretary, Susie. She's a kind person, but a little ditzy and often uses the wrong word in the wrong manner. Um, During these stories, Dan would have to conduct quite a bit of research and is aided by this thing called the morgue that's in within the Star Times. Uh, the morgue is a record of every news story that the Star Times has ever published. It has massive files on people based on the actions that they've done that made the newspaper. Things like birth and marriage and death notices, major business deals, society columns, massive scandals, that sort of thing. It's also able to provide a great deal of insight into historical events should they become relevant to whatever Dan's doing. This resource allows Dan a great deal of knowledge surrounding whatever he has to deal with in his adventures. So, let's get to the premise of how this works. The show basically is great for telling a wide range of stories. In one episode, Dan may be brought in as a patsy and framed for a crime, as mentioned before, or in the next, he's helping a child save their parents from some sort of terrible calamity. Because of the nature of the ad and the fact that he doesn't charge for his services, the people that come to him for help are usually not very wealthy and often overlooked by more conventional sources of aid. They really can't go to the cops, that sort of thing. While the stories do hold some elements of the mystery genre, I do not think this would be the right to place the show in that genre. It fits more comfortably in adventure. Um, it's a pretty. It's not as long running as some of the other series we've discussed. It's got 52 episodes, so it does have a decent amount of material. It won't run out too quickly, but it's not long, but it isn't short either. Some cons about this show. Susie would not fly today. No, no. You cannot have a female character that ditzy without it appearing a little sexist. Just a little bit sexist, I think. Could it be made today, though? Yep, no doubt, both as a radio show and a television show. I believe there was an attempt to make this into a television show, but it fell through. They'd gotten pretty far as I can understand, but they basically fell through. I guess these things happened. Um, if rebooted, I think the concept would be quite fresh. It would provide a new kind of adventure series that I think would be quite successful. I think there would also be a wide range of fun and new stories that could be told with this. And I think the digital age would be able to make for another wider range of adventures. The internet would also be an interesting counterbalance to whatever the modern reboot to the morgue would be. You could have information that was easily gathered from the internet, and but lesser known things only available to Dan by the morgue, or vice versa. Even it's quite interesting that you could do that. I believe the series was also revived as a comic series in like 2010, but it does differ a bit from the source material, but it does keep to the same themes as the original. Something to consider. So, yeah, that's our first series, I think. Quite an interesting one. Um, yeah, Quite interesting. Anything you'd like me to add, operator? Yeah, I forgot to introduce him. He's here as well, as always. Yeah. So, I think that's all I have to say about Box 13. Time to move on to our other show. Another show about a writer. Um, but this one's set in the Old West. And because they're both sort of adventures and writers, I figured, and I couldn't say a lot about either of them, because I couldn't do as in depth, I will admit, about this as I did with like Dangerous Assignment or yours truly, Johnny Dollar. But I felt I could do a double feature on them. So, Frontier Gentleman. It opens with this tagline: Herewith, an Englishman's account of life and death in the West. As a reporter for the Times of London, he writes his colorful and unusual accounts, but as a man with a gun, he lives and becomes a part of the violent years in the new territories. Quite interesting, isn't it? It's quite a cool opening tagline, we have to admit, but it is kind of interesting. All right, let's get on to the premise of the show. This show follows J.B. Kendall, a writer from London who documents the post Civil War United States to inform the public in England. His adventures would have taken him across the West where he would meet many different characters, all trying to make the best of their lot in life, deal with what life has dealt with them, trying to find justice at times when it was not available, or just launching a scheme that was as harebrained as it was genius. This is not an uncommon theme in some of these stories. So, J.B. Kendall is a newspaper writer, but he's also a former soldier. He used to fight in India for the British Army. He's a capable gunfighter during the few episodes where he actually has to fight against opponent personally. He can hold his own and use tactics and skills that his opponents are not necessarily familiar with. He's also a decent human being, often not willing just to report on people's problems and what on the people he meets, but he's also willing to go a great deal of the way to, help them. Great lengths on helping them. Uh, and help them get on their way, help them with wise advice, help them with material support, that sort of thing. He also has integrity and he will not doctor a story or alter a story to his readers. He will document the truth as he sees it. Something of interest that I noticed with this series is that he can get his stories to Britain and get paid for it really easily, and it's not regarded as a great difficulty. Although telegram technology was very effective at the time, it would not be possible to send a telegram directly to England with any ease. There were some wires at this time period that they're depicting, but they were unreliable. Um, so you could send telegrams to the coast easy enough, but it would still take a while for that to get to England and then for Kendall to get paid for his work. It's kind of interesting to think about. I may be getting too deep into the weeds with this, but I think it's kind of interesting to look at and think about. Um, yeah. What carries the show, I think, is the wide range of characters that are explored in the show. Each is interesting and different in their motivations and what they're trying to do. But what makes them compelling is that some of them are based on historical figures or are even historical figures themselves. This is quite interesting in my mind and would make for interesting listening. But let's go to the cons on why this show has problems. The accents are terrible. John Dehner's British accent, and he's the man who plays J.B. Kendall. He also plays, I believe, Paladin in the radio adaptation of, what's it called? Oh, Have Gun Will Travel. There we are. I'll remember it. I would rather wish that you remembered things like this. Ah, well. You're doing fine. Don't worry. You're doing great. Okay, keep going. What was I? Yeah, terrible accents. John Dehner cannot do a British accent. It's terrible. Also, the accents of Asian Americans in this show leave something to be desired, and accents of Native peoples leave a bit to be desired. All the accents seem to be caricatures. I mean, like Dangerous Assignment may have the occasional dodgy-ish accent, but this is bad. Yeah. Something to keep a note of, like, the characters are depicted as human beings with, like, motivations and whatnot. Like, these are well-rounded characters, it's just that the accents used to depict them are caricatures, is the best way I think to describe it. Yeah. Also, the show has to be listened to in sequence as it follows Kendall as he's traveling across the United States, and it's hard to follow his journey if you miss an episode. This is not like Box 13 or any of the other series except for Absolute Power that I've discussed. Yeah. So, could this show be done today? While it's an interesting concept, I do think there would not be much of an appetite for this show today. The Wild West as a setting has been played out, and I do not think a Wild West revival is likely. Something that I think would be needed to necessitate the revival of this show. Although it might be a blueprint for a show where someone goes traveling across a place at an interesting historical period of time and just reports as a newspaper reporter what's going on. I think there probably are shows like that, but I think there might be a place for a show like that. So yeah, that's the double feature for today. Glad you could join us. They're both okay shows. They do have their issues, as I discussed. But yeah, I'd still recommend listening to them. Just keep those cons in mind when listening to them. Yeah, the music for Frontier Gentleman is also very good. I have to give credit where credit is due, and the opening tagline for both shows is delivered well and I think makes the show. It's the show's signature and trademark, and they do it well. But yeah, so I thank you all for watching and listening. So yeah, I hope that these shows will tickle your fancy and provide you with some entertainment while you do your while we all do our drudgery office jobs. Yeah. So yeah, but thank you for coming, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.